Rabbi,
Good afternoon, Joe.
and I hope you're doing well on this spring evening, afternoon day.
Yes,
Um, you made a comment in a conversation we were having once about helicopters on Mars and the point of that, and how it factored against the needs of people on Earth. And this is not a new argument, but something that's been going on for quite some time, especially in the United States, in terms of government funding. Do you want to start explaining more your position on that? And then I will start arguing with you about it.
certainly. We have a very large number of intelligent scientists and engineers capable of attacking and solving problems. One of the newest, most brilliant things I've seen is the tailgate. And now I don't remember what truck it's on, so that shows how great their advertising is. But when you fold it down, it folds into a step. And I looked at it and said, why didn't somebody think of that years ago? Nobody did years ago. They thought of it now. Well, given that type of thinking, why don't we pose the question, instead of putting a helicopter on Mars, housing homeless, how affordable housing? Here in Montgomery County, they just came out with a paper on affordable housing. And it said, yes, your income is $80,000 to $90,000. That's what they talked about you need for affordable. That's not my definition of affordable housing. That already is you can afford housing. But because everything is so expensive, they came up with this threshold that, no, why don't we take or put or however these minds and say, how do we have affordable housing? How can we help?
Well, yeah, I understand your point, and I am not the best person in the world to argue this side of the discussion, but my alma mater, Carnegie Mellon University, has long been, as part of the architectural program, working on affordable housing units. And all around the world, science has been trying to address this, but the only really significant improvements that I've ever seen have been experiments with new techniques and technologies which were developed as part of scientific programs that were not originally intended. For example, aircraft aluminum, which is now being used to make housing, and industrial foam, which is being experimented with. And there are a lot of other examples, but the idea to me is you don't need to have an immediate reason for government research funding like helicopters on Mars to develop a benefit that later on can be used to help with things like housing.
Let's pretend for a moment that you and I are out on the Chesapeake Bay, and we've decided to do a day of sailing. And for whatever reason, remember the Chesapeake Bay has a rocky bottom in many places, and I tear a hole, and we're now leaking. Do you think we should bail the boat? Or maybe we should have a picnic lunch and a discussion about the meaning of life. Which is it? Tell me which it is. We have an immediate problem. How do you want to spend our resources?
I think at that moment, a helicopter would come in very handy, don't you?
I'm going to call the Coast Guard, and they're going to send us a helicopter, and we don't have to design one. We already have one, and we also have the Coast Guard that's set up to rescue those of us that don't pay attention.
Well, so you're saying that we already have the technology in place, or do we need to improve current technology more to solve problems?
I don't think the problem is in technology or helicopters or anything else. I think we do not want to face the problem. A problem that's not defined can never be solved. We have to acknowledge we have a problem. And it's about the Benjamins. It's about allocation of money. We don't want to spend money for a variety of reasons. We blame homelessness on the people rather than lifestyle, economy, jobs, training, background. The list is endless. And what we want to do is we want to blame the person. If they worked harder, they wouldn't be homeless. If they did this, if they did that. And we're not willing to allocate funds or resources. And we are willing to allocate money for helicopter on Mars because it strikes the Flash Gordon in all of us and our imagination. But if I were to take that billions of dollars and turn it over to Carnegie Mellon and say, in the next month, we want to start developing housing and we're going to give people vouchers to be able to pay for it. I think that's what's going on. It's truly, and think of our own lives. Why do people run up debt on their credit card and then pay 24% a year interest? Listen, when I grew up in Boston, the family couldn't even charge 8%. That was considered outrageous. Now a bank can legally charge you 24% to use money. Why anyone would be, and what are you spending it on? And again, there's a kind of a glamour. There's kind of a, rather than saying, I'm not going to spend money I don't have because I don't want to pay the interest. Therefore, I'm not going to borrow to buy this item. I'm going to do this item. And I think that's what we do in society, Joe. We write off those people.
But technology is not necessarily not the solution. And I think, for example, your boat, is it a wooden boat, a cast iron boat, or is it fiberglass or something else that was developed purely as a new material? But I understand what you're saying, Rabbi, that we need to reallocate our funding, but I could point out the cost of one F-35 fighter would probably house all the people in Baltimore that are homeless right now. And so I think we shouldn't necessarily pick on science or NASA or any other pure research or the Caltech or any of the jet propulsion laboratories so much as we need to start reevaluating what our priorities are.
I agree with you. And that's what I'm saying is we're talking about the Benjamins and the return on money invested. And we need to take another look on human beings and life and realize that 80, 60, 70, 80% of our population is on the verge of homelessness, or there are food deserts where in the cities where there's no supermarkets. The 7-Eleven is the only place supplying. And until we actually acknowledge some of these problems, nothing can ever get solved. Because until we say, I think that homelessness, lack of affordable housing is a problem for our population, how do we go about solving it? We put a man on the moon. We're talking about travel to outer space. So why don't we have the same project? Enlist the same people, and it'll come out with great discoveries. Who says that we need a war in order to advance medicine? We don't. But we're not willing to put the money in or the time in to something else. Curing cancer. Some of the facilities and research are looking towards this push to develop a cure for some, and we have some very stubborn cancers right now. Okay, let's do that as a project instead of a man on the moon or a space station or Mars. But the problem, Joe, is it's not sexy. It's not sexy. And we just don't like this idea of helping people. It's just not in our DNA.
Well, put a tight black skirt on it, and I would vote for funding on cancer cures. But I think we agree on basically the idea that we need to start thinking about where we put our money and how we spend it and what are our goals as a country or as the human race, as earthlings, as William Holden said in his movie. So how do we start doing that? That's the impossible question, isn't it?
This has been the function of religion since the beginning of time. In many ways, our religious institutions have gotten sidetracked. They've built these mega churches. They have pastors who have Lear jets and huge buildings. I really refuse to believe that Jesus would be proud of them. And we've sidetracked our own religious endeavors into more feel-good moments. I want to feel good. When, if you look at our religious teachings from the beginning, it was we feel good by helping. Feel good was there, but that wasn't the goal. The goal was our actions will lead us to feel good. Where now we start with, I want to feel good. I want a Disney moment. Everything should be a Disney moment. And if you look, Disney has done incredible. And we talked about that last time in the novelty gene, that you like novelty. And I think that's terrific. And it's perfect. I don't think it should spill over into the rest of life. Everything shouldn't be about having a Disney moment. Then, however, it doesn't mean we can't feel good. We can feel good about doing. And our religious institutions need to take the lead. Our politicians have to take the lead. Instead of thinking of how do I get reelected, they have to look at each other, and say, how do we solve this homeless program? How do we deal with rampant hunger? How do we deal with the problem at our border? How do we, not that you're wrong and I have the solution, or I have a solution, but I won't tell you, not this adversarial. And that's the question, and I'm not sure how to turn it, except through the public, except people saying, we're not going to elect hateful people. We're not going to elect people that are out to stuff their pockets. We're not going to elect people that promote hate. We're not going to elect people who spread lies. We're going to go back to a different kind of society or candidate. But does that mean you're a Pollyanna? Does that mean one's unrealistic? We somehow got here. Then the question you're asking is, how do we reverse it? How do we get back out again? We have the institutions. So now the question is, how do we have the responsible, good people standing in them?
Well, we could always go to Mars and start over. And then I bet a couple of helicopters would come in real handy. But
Safe.
thank you, Rabbi. As usual, this is one of those problems where we can't just solve it by talking about it, that people have to go out and do it.
Correct.
And I hope you're always there to show us the way towards a positive action as opposed to a casual conversation. So thank you very much, as always.
You're welcome, and good day, Joe.